I got the coffee.
The Multiverse Fundraiser is partnering with Comic Books for Kids to raise money for their cause. Their mission is to provide comic books to children in hospitals and cancer centers across the United States, Canada, and the UK. We believe in the importance of providing stories that promote hope and bravery to kids who are facing things that are scarier than any supervillain. And we truly believe in this cause. To donate, you can either go to our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/the Multiverse Fundraiser or directly to comicbooksforkids.org.
Hey, and welcome to the Multiverse Fundraiser. I am Willow Skylor. With me today is C C cubed, Clyde Hall, Cliff, and Carlin Stewart. Hello,
Might be as
everyone.
bad as the Borg.
Yeah, we should do C-lister boosters.
Oh no. B-list is fine. C-list, we're going to the human fly, man.
I did that for B-listers last year, so yeah.
Well, you guys are definitely more knowledgeable about this topic than me. So, who wants to go first?
Who's at the top of your screen?
All right. Okay. So, Clyde.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm wearing my first character, which is Dr. Sin, alias the Scarecrow. Now, of all the B-listers that I've done, the two I've picked for today they have the least amount of comic book time of anybody. And you can see from the artwork here, oddly enough, Dr. Sin has actually had more live action iterations than comic book appearances for the most part. As you can see up there on the left, on the screen there, it was part of a Disney set of episodes, 3 episodes on the Wonderful World of Disney back in the mid 60s. Gold Key put out 3 comic books with that character, and they have the beautiful George Wilson painted cover on the third one. The other 2 are they are painted by Sam Sabat, which
wasn't he known for westerns?
Westerns, the Phantom, he did some beautiful Phantom covers.
Those horses are beautiful.
Oh yeah. So, and this struck a chord. This show struck a chord with people. I thought it was just me, but like I have my copy of that 3rd issue there. That's the only one that I own, and those go for a couple $100, and in not graded, just in having a reading copy kind of thing. I happen to get mine a little cheaper because it was missing 1 page. So, so there's definitely an interest in this character. As you can see, mine is well loved.
Nice.
So, but he made an appearance in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. In the comic, he's on a portrait showing the Gulliver era League. He's also in the background of the movie in a portrait. He's with Natty Bumppo, who's Hawkeye from Last of the Mohicans. He's with Lemuel Gulliver from Gulliver's Travels as an older man, an older sailor. And he also has, I knew I would forget the other one. Let me think here. He is also with the Scarlet Pimpernel, Sir Percy Blakeney. Yeah. So, that's almost all of his appearances, except Disney. They, for their Disney magazine Comic Zone number 6 in the 90s, he came back for an adventure where he crossed over with Captain Jack Sparrow. Beautiful Brett Blevins art. And those things are on Worth Point because of the Scarecrow. People love the Scarecrow, this version of a Scarecrow. So, and they had plans to do a Sleepy Hollow crossover with him in the colonies, because it takes place in the story of the Scarecrow takes place in 1775.
Mhm.
So they were going to do a colonial story with the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So basically, any Johnny Depp movie, apparently they were going to try to cross it over with the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh. But that publication went up in smoke before they could get to that. But Brett Blevins, if you look at his art sites and stuff, he's got a lot of the illustrations that he did in preparation for it. So that's definitely one of the reasons to bring this B-list character back, because I would love to see those stories.
The bottom photo with the house and the raging sea.
Yeah.
Man, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Blevins did wonderful. And if we got another a series, a comic book series, I would love to see him do the covers at least, but the interiors too. That would be
And
awesome.
what do you know about the picture there? It looks like he's hovering or gliding across it. Is that the Justice League down there? Is that the Justice League building?
No, that's that is a prison where the Crown has imprisoned smugglers.
Oh, okay.
Because he's an outlaw. He's a smuggler. Or, as it says in the beginning of the show's theme song, which if you haven't watched it, it's on YouTube. It's free. Go watch. Disney has never put this forth as a big property. They liked it. They did it. Walt Disney picked it out. He really liked the story, but it kind of went by the wayside. The show's theme song says, "On the southern coast of England, there's a legend people tell of days long ago when the great Scarecrow would ride from the jaws of hell and laugh, ha ha ha, with a fiendish yell. He'd always help the farmer when there was no gold to bring. He'd find a way for the poor to pay the taxes of the king. Scarecrow, every man would sing." In short, he was a masked man, calling himself the Scarecrow. He led a band of smugglers called the Gentlemen. They outmaneuvered the revenue agents of King George III in 1775 Britain, and then they would sell their French liquor and supplies at a profit because they were free from crushing import taxes on it. They'd take that money then and they would distribute it between the common folk of Dymchurch to keep their taxes paid, their cupboards stocked, and their families out of debtor's prison. There's a strong vibe of we went to war with Britain for our independence a lot over the taxation. Well, it was hard on people in England too. And Walt Disney, the time frame of the series of books that this is based on was a little earlier than 1775, but he moved it a little bit further to closer to the Revolutionary War so it would have a hook for American audiences. So but the Dr. Sin story, there's a movie, Dr. Sin, from 1937. Right before Disney launched their thing, Hammer had like some sort of a European right to do another Dr. Sin adaptation for film. So they came out, they were going to do Peter Cushing played their Dr. Sin, except Disney went, we just got the rights for this. So they changed it to Dr. Bliss. But if you ever see him playing a smuggler and a vicar, because the Scarecrow is a man of the cloth in his secret identity. If you see Peter Cushing in that role, he got to play that. So on the series that Walt Disney put forth, they had Patrick McGoohan playing Dr. Sin. Dr. Christopher Sin is his real name, and also playing the part of the Scarecrow. So Scarecrow, masked rebel during the Age of Sail, but in his everyday life, he is kindly Dr. Christopher Sin, the vicar of Dymchurch, who watches over his parishioners. He was once a promising scholar, impressive Oxford credentials, and he has a secret past, though. They don't get into this in the TV show. This is why a comic book series, to expand on it, would be good. He gets kidnapped by pirates. He overthrows their pirates in a Pirate Roberts kind of way and leads them until he can make it so he can escape. So he learns a lot about how to, small unit tactics and things like this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have survived. When he escapes, he gets back to England and reclaims his family name. And because of his education, he accepts a position as vicar in this little seaport community in the south of England called Dymchurch. You have a group of smugglers who are working down there to smuggle in goods from France, and but they're going to get caught and hung. I mean, he has seen this happen before, and he looks at the parishioners who are starving. They are press ganged into service in the, because, oh, you can't pay your taxes? That's okay. You got a son? Yeah, he can be one of our, we're gonna press gang him into serving with the Royal Navy. So he's seeing all this, the crushing taxation, that the crown is just not being fair. And so he decides that he will become a masked leader of the smugglers so that they can be more effective and not caught. And he's eerily effective. Locals believe that the Scarecrow is a vengeful ghost sent to hold the king's enforcers accountable for their corruption. So with this character, you have a combination of Zorro, Robin Hood, and Batman. And you also have potential for adventure incorporating other characters of the time periods. Besides the Pimpernel and Hawkeye and Oliver, you got allies and enemies could come from anywhere, like Dracula, a young Dr. Van Helsing, Victor Frankenstein and his creature. Depending on license availability, a Phantom, the ghost who walks, since he has many iterations of him throughout time, since the Age of Sail, you could have a team up with him and Dr. Sin, which would be especially fan moment. Okay, Patrick McGoohan played Dr. Sin, but he also played the ghost of the 21st Phantom's father in the 1996 film, making him, when he was alive, the 20th Phantom. So you'd have McGoohan both of his roles.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned, you're talking about piracy and the high seas. And yesterday I was doing an interview with Jeff Johnson, who at one point he worked for CrossGen. And do you remember the pirate book that they had, El Khazars?
I've heard of that.
I loved it. It was wonderful. It was just, if somebody had told me that I was jonesing for a pirate book, I would never. It's like, nah, but it's one of those things of, and in who in the Watchmen, who watches the Watchmen?
Yeah.
What's the comic book? It's a pirate book.
Tales of the Black Freighter.
Because when you've got Dr. Manhattan walking around, what do you want to read about? Not superheroes. That's real life. You wanted the pirates. So it's funny to me that in 2 days in a row, the theme of older your yarns and tales, piracy on the high seas, it still rings true anyway. Right. I digress.
Well, like valid points. You could also, there are historical stories you could do, like the Beast of Gévaudan from the French lycanthropic kind of legend. Maybe Spring Hill Jack, early sightings. American possibilities, you got witchcraft trials, vampire epidemics of the 1700s, pirates like John Lafitte, notable individuals.
Put a pin in the witchcraft stuff. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Put a pin in that one.
Okay. Daniel Boone, individuals like Daniel Boone and British and colonial leaders of the American Revolution, all could be background characters. And as I say, there's definitely interest in this character. It's because of McGoohan. I saw interviews with people who knew the character from reading them as boys, especially British lads. And they were like, yeah, he was okay. It's sort of like the Scarlet Pimpernel. Yeah, I don't hear about him a lot. He was all right. But that show and watching McGoohan go from this manic, demonic kind of presence on the marshes, preying on the king's men. And he was not a big murderer. He's still a vicar. So he tries not to kill, but he outsmarts and he outrides and he out tactics the king's men. And then when he's Dr. Sin, he's this very kind. And as a little kid, when I watched this, I was scared to death of the Scarecrow, but I loved Dr. Sin because he was so gentle and kind, and he was a good man of the cloth. But the two sides of him done by Patrick McGoohan, it's awesome to watch. And you're speaking about comic books. Okay, so a couple of years ago, there was a series, a limited series called Seven Swords. In 2022, the writer was Evan Dougherty, and he took 7 historical and fictional swashbucklers, and he put them together in, I love writing historical fiction stuff, and this was seamless. I didn't think too much about it, the chances of getting all this to work together, and he did it beautifully. So that guy, if we're going to have another series, I want to see it written by him and painted by Brett Blevins. And I think it would introduce the elusive and mysterious Scarecrow of Romney Marsh to a whole new generation of readers.
I'm gonna have to revisit the Scarlet Pimpernel because I don't remember that character being
He rescued people that were up for being killed in the French Revolution. A lot of innocent people got swept up in that whole thing too, not just the elite and all. Anybody that had certain accusations at him, well, let's go ahead and chop their head off too. So he would mask himself and he would help them escape.
All right.
Claude,
So, go ahead.
Sorry, Claude. Do you know if the Disney show was it released like on VHS back in the 80s by any chance?
Very limited and very briefly. That's one of the reasons that people don't know it as much as some of the other Disney things is they have never paraded it out as like a Blu-ray, big fancy Blu-ray cut or anything like that.
Okay, because when I was younger and my mom was working and putting herself through school, we were so poor. It was for you younger kids, we would go to the video store on the weekend and rent a VCR in movies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fairly certain that I've watched these. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah.
I think that was one of our weekend treats along with like Transformers the movie or something. Pretty sure I've seen these.
They did release it. They just didn't release it very. I think like on the DVD, they only had so many they released,
Right.
and it was
Okay.
they trotted it out, to promote the Pirates of the Caribbean and thinking of it for the Sleepy Hollow, but and it seems to be public domain now.
Okay.
So, however, Disney would probably, because they did the little iconic looks and things, they would probably, like when it was in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the portrait doesn't really look like the Scarecrow very much. The movie did, but that one didn't. So I imagine that Disney still has rights to certain things they did with the character that they would not be above trying to send you a litigious letter. So
Okay.
All right. So we do have some comments. Ryan Permisson was supposed to be the host today, but unfortunately he had something come up. So I wish I could be there with you on set, but I am here in spirit.
Hey, Ryan.
And he says, nice shirt.
Thank you.
And Clyde has a gold mine of comics worth tons of money.
No, not really.
All right, Cliff, I'm excited to see what you have for us.
Well, that makes one of us.
What character would you like to touch on?
All right. I always hate going after Clyde because he's so well spoken and knows what he's talking about. And then there's me. I need a buffer. I need Carlin to go before me where I don't feel as bad. But I went with Max Mercury from the Flash family.
And that was him. That the character.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
That is him. I was first exposed to this character, probably like most people my age, through Who's Who, the definitive edition of the DC universe. I remember when I was 7, 8, flipping through and looking at all these characters, and this top picture, Quicksilver. I saw it and I was like, huh. That's not the Quicksilver I know from the few Marvel comics I read. He's kind of neat looking. But I never saw him again in comics until the 1990s in Flash. And then he was called Max Mercury. And I was like, I wonder if that's the same character. Because in the early 90s, none of us had the internet. So I found out Max Mercury was Quicksilver. Quicksilver was a Quality Comics character. from the 1940s. He first appeared in 1941 in National Comics. He was a backup story in the book. Uncle Sam was the Superman of the Quality Comics line. And he had, and National Comics was one of the big ones that he was a part of. And to fill out the pages, they had backup stories. And Quicksilver was stuck in there among such luminaries as Paul Bunyan. But Quicksilver was apparently, from what I've read, the first Flash imitator. He was the first to do the he runs fast gimmick. Not much was really talked about him. He was Jack Cole was one of the creators, and he did like most characters in the 1940s. He fought crime and gangsters and those terrible fifth columnists that were apparently all over America. But you really didn't know much about the character. He was this guy who ran fast and made one-liners. And apparently, like everyone in the 1940s, he had a newsboy sidekick. And he ran the book until he last appeared in 1949, and about the time that superhero comics kind of fell out of fashion in America, and it became more sci-fi books and war comics and westerns. So Quality quit producing their superhero line, and then quietly kind of went out of business after that, which is a shame because they had some really cool superhero comics. And then in 1956, DC bought them and put them in the vault. Didn't do anything with them. And then the only thing that between the 1940s and 1993 you really saw of Quicksilver was Roy Thomas and his All-Star Squadron. If you appeared in the Golden Age, he was going to put you in his book somewhere. So he popped up in panels here and there, but it wasn't until Mark Waid's Flash in the 90s that we had much with this character, and he appeared and he was Max Mercury. And he was kind of like the exposition police, or he was kind of Mark Waid's what is the term that Grant Morrison uses, his avatar in a book. Basically, anytime you need to explain why the characters were able to do something, that was Max's job. Max was the first one to discover the Speed Force, which was where all the speedsters in the DC universe get their power from. He started, apparently, and this is all retcon, none of this was in the 1940s. He was a cavalryman. That's easy for me to say. In the 1830s, and he was friends with the local Native American tribe, and they were slaughtered by his commanding officer's troop when he was out on patrol one day, and the ancient shaman gifted him with speed powers to carry on their traditions. He was called I am not even going to pretend to butcher that Native American name on the internet. But he was a speedster in the 1840s. And as time went on, he would run faster and faster. And then one day he felt this tug. He didn't know what it was, and it scared him. And he pulled away from it. And pull bounced him from the 1840s and the 1890s. And it turned out later on he found out it was this Speed Force that they were all connected to. And in Mark Waid's run, it was explained, if you run fast enough, you'll get pulled into the Speed Force, kind of like a Jedi dying to become one with the Force. And he spent the rest of the 1800s and early 1900s trying to get back into it, but every time he ran, he would get bounced into a different time period. And in each one, he was a speedster. It was basically Mark Waid's way of explaining anytime there was someone who ran fast in the history of comics that wasn't named this character, that character, they were Max Mercury. And he apparently he ended up getting bounced into the 1940s, and he became Johnny Quick's mentor, and teaching him how to use his power. And that was basically his role. He just bounced from time period to time period, up until he came in the 90s and became part of the Flash family with Wally and all of them. And he was nicknamed the Zen Master of Speed because he had spent his entire life studying this thing that gave them their power. And so he was always there to give advice. And like I said, if there was some story related thing that didn't make sense that Mark wanted to make sure we understood, there was Mac to explain it. He was also kind of like, don't really know the best way to say it, but he was kind of like the anti-Jay Garrick, because Jay in the comics was, he was the grandfather and he was loving and, good job, little Billy, and all of that. And there was Max, and he was like, no, you're an idiot. That was wrong. And so I think he was their way of having that sort of cranky old man stay off my lawn and not make it be Jay Garrick. And then he ended up with, depending on who you ask, the unfortunate
because
job
he
of
was the
being,
cranky old man from the 1800s.
yes, exactly. Then he got stuck with the either great or terrible job, depending on who you ask, of babysitting Bart Allen. He was Bart's mentor in the Impulse comic, and if you read any of those, I feel really bad for him. But and that was kind of his role. He was like the player coach for the Flash family. And apparently, I never watched it, but apparently he had a couple of scenes in the Flash TV show that I never watched. But he was always this neat character. His costume was different from all the other speedsters. Everyone else had some kind of red or this theme. His was blue and white. And unlike the other speedsters, he, because he was a cowboy, he didn't mind, if need be, killing someone. And he was there to let them know, sometimes this happens. We don't want to do it, but we have to. And I just always thought I have a special place in my heart for the background characters. I love the big shiny Justice League characters, but they're not as interesting. Max, he lived life, and I mean, apparently in the 1970s, and I don't think this was in Mark's run. I think this was later on. He got hurt in one of his adventures and was getting help from a kindly doctor and his wife. While he was there, he fell in love with the wife and had an affair with her, and the husband found out. So Max had to leave, and that's how he bounced from the 1970s into 1990. And then he found out he had a daughter with this lady. And now his daughter is a senior citizen, and he's her age or a little bit younger. And so in the Impulse book, he's trying to be in this lady's life without revealing this big convoluted story. And so, he was, I don't want to say he was a tragic character because he was never written that way. He was always written as this guy, this Zen master of speed. He meditated all the time to try to figure out his speed powers, and he wasn't as fast as a Flash was, but his experience and everything made him be able to do things they couldn't. Like, it was never specifically said, but I'm pretty sure he could fly like Johnny Quick and Jesse Quick could, but they never actually said that. So I don't want to say he could, but I'm pretty sure he could. And it was neat to have that character there that always had all the answers, usually by trial by error, which to me is the best way to learn. So I always liked Max, and finding out he had this big long history of being bounced from publisher to publisher, kind of like he got bounced from timeline to timeline. It fit. So I always liked Max. And I've never saw him in Flash. I hope they did him right, but from what I've seen of that show, they didn't. So go out and read Mark Waid's Flash. Thank you. Come again.
Awesome. Thank you. So just to remind everybody of what we're here for, we are here to help with the fundraiser of raising money for comic books for kids, and that's why we're talking about comic book character B-listers. I'm going to run a commercial here. I think this would be a perfect time to do this. If I can just find out. There it is.
And this is what we do. We do this every day. On Christmas Day, I was getting emails from hospitals. On Christmas Day, I was responding. Sickness doesn't take a break. We are there for the hospitals. We are there for the kids. We will do whatever we can do. And as I look and talk to you, and I talk to all the people who are watching this, be a part of this. However you want to be a part of this, be a part of it. If you can send us $5, send us $5. If you can send us 5 comic books, a Funko Pop, a toy, a children's book, send it to us. However you want to make a difference, because we're all in this together. And here's the cool news. Nobody knows who I am, and here's why. When we give these materials to the hospitals give it to the kids and the parents. Comic book for kids and my name never shows up. When this stuff goes to the military, when my comic shop send the pallets, my name is never there. And that's great. That's all right. Because it's not, as I said, about us. It's not about promoting who we are. It's about all of us together in the industry making a difference for so many. And that's what we're about, Kelly. And that's what we do every single day of the year.
And I enjoyed having a conversation with him the other day, and still crying a little bit because of what he's doing is so important to children. The goal is $2,000, $2,029, but I feel like I'm seeing that in Canadian funds. I'm not sure if that is what it is in American funds, but we are at $1,241 already raised, more than halfway, and we have 7 days left. So don't worry if you can't get to it. Donate today. You can donate in a couple days. The website is down at the bottom there for you guys to find us. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how we do once once this weekend is done and all the videos are being passed around social media. Carlin, what character did you want to talk about?
Well, I actually picked this character last year, and as we were talking, it hit me. No one was talking about Rom, the Space Knight. And so if you look at the 4th image where the toy is, Rom actually started out in 1979 as a Parker Brothers toy. It was Parker Brothers' first real foray into toys, and it was also the beginning of the electronics age. If you kind of look at the front of Rom there, he's got a bunch of slits in his chest plate. That's where the speaker was for the sound. And he's got his 3 little attachments. Rom had the neuralizer, which was his kind of ray beam. He had an analyzer, which allowed him to see his nemesis in their real form. And then he had a translator for all the languages. But I mean, that right there, that picture, I mean, it's the beginning of the 1970s electronic toys, still pretty primitive. I mean, this is the age of Blip and Magic Merlin. So Parker Brothers winds up going, and they wound up being bought in 1991 by Hasbro. So now they're part of Hasbro. But Parker Brothers at the time wound up going to Marvel, and they wound up using them for licensing to create the story. And you'll see down there, there's a photo spread of the first 5 issues of ROM. And up at the top is a larger picture of ROM #1 that was also used in some reprints we'll talk about in a minute. But when that toy was created, they originally were going to call it COBOL after the programming language, which, and unfortunately, someone in Parker Brothers upper management said that stinks, and they went with ROM because it was easier to use. I mean, someone thought of how a child would say this, and ROM the Space Knight does have a better ring than COBOL the Space Knight. So, I just like the fact that toy exists. I kind of wish I had one now. If our memory serves, I did at one point, and it long since has disappeared. But the comic book actually outlasted the toy. The toy wound up closing out, but the comic book ran for 75 issues, and I think they had they had a couple of annuals in there, and it ran from December of 79 through February of 86. And the storyline was pretty much done by Bill Mantello, and he worked on the Micronauts. He had a really good run doing various licensed properties, but he was also the co-creator of Rocket Raccoon. So, I mean, along with Keith Griffin, who recently passed away in October of 23. But Bill Mantlo, he wound up in, I guess, around 1980s or so. He wound up studying for a law degree and wound up being he was basically hit in traffic and has been under medical care since. So that's one reason his name is kind of fading, and I'm glad we can talk about him and bring him back up because he had a really good career going, and ROM was part of it. And then you had Saul Buscema, who is the same Buscema family. He's the younger brother. So he has a great legacy and wonderful art. He had a huge run on Hulk and Spider-Man. So it's not like if you go back and get the original ROMs, or if you buy the omnibus that's out now, I mean, you're getting spectacular art. And Bill, he wound up taking basically a toy that they said, here's this robot fighter. And he wound up expanding it. I'm going to move my notes here just for a second so I don't lose my place. He took the basic idea of the ROM robot and turned him into a cyborg warrior. So you have this idea that, and there are others. They wind up defending their planet of Gallandor, and I mean I love some of these names. Gallandor is, and you just take Gallant and modified it a little, and their primary villain was something called the Dire Wraiths, and the Dire Wraiths, they actually just like Cliff was saying with Mark Waid, picking up a character, they have been randomly picked up throughout Marvel history and kind of reused and recycled. These guys were offshoots of the Skrulls, so they're shapeshifters. And it was kind of implied at one point, and I think they backed off of this a little bit, that they actually sucked your brains out to get your memories.
Oh.
Yeah. And then to go back to what Clyde was saying earlier about witchcraft, which is why I say stick a pin in this, the females of the Dire Wraith race actually engaged in evil magics, and that's why they split off from the Skrulls. The Skrulls don't even like these guys. So I mean, these are bad dudes. So they're they wind up having obviously they're having a big war over Gallandor, and the main weapon is a neuralizer, which ironically it doesn't kill the wraiths, it sends them into limbo. It's kind of this is the age of the Phantom Zone, but they couldn't use the Phantom Zone because that's DC. You have limbo. So these neuralizers send them to the limbo dimension. But obviously, I mean, dun 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 dun. Not all the dire wraiths are vanquished, and 200 years later, Rom arrives at Earth, and much like the Salem witch trials, he winds up coming down in Virginia. So, um, his base of operations is in the Virginias, and because these guys are shapeshifters, here you are with a cyborg warrior who, if you go back to if you can pull the image back up for a second, I'll pause while you find it. There you go. On the third image with the red background, and the lady is saying, I'll expand it on my side so I can read it. Give me just one pause here while my image loads. She's saying, the rogue space knights are killing the last humans of Galandor. Do something, Rom. And he's standing there saying, I can't. And it says Code of Honor. So you have this you have this cyborg warrior that has this code of honor. He winds up 200 years later being in the Virginias. Well, he's having to track down these shapeshifters. So he blasts them with a neuralizer, but they're shapeshifters. So what do people see? They see him killing humans. So there's a whole nother level of drama there because he's being hunted, as even though he's the one trying to defend the poor little Earth. And I liked the second image, which is actually part of the first in the first 5 books, where they were setting up the backstory, because you see this wraith and he's blasting off his cyborg armor and saying, now I've got you. So they wind up, but so you've got all this, you've got a lost planet. He's come to Earth. He's trying to defend Earth from the remnants of this terrible race. And because they are so far from their distant homeworld, the males of the dire wraith are pretty much in charge with their interstellar science technologies. At some point, spell casting is involved to alter our sun so that the females can try and wrestle more control, and the females are a little bit more, let's just say they're more overt and violent. And once they start acting, the other heroes of Earth realize, and Shield realize that there's a real threat. And then Rom starts slowly gaining allies because now they know that there's this other thing going on. But toward the end of the series, as they knew it was going to wind down, Rom is able to return to his home planet. But even there's a second generation of space knights that have gone corrupted. So he has to summon the original knights, and they have to have a civil war effectively. He finally gets to his original body, is restored to humanity, and gets married. So I mean, there's this nice closure in it at the end of the day. But I mean, just like Clyde was saying, there's a lot of different imageries going on and a lot of different references to older storylines and just the older mythos of stories. Then in 2016 through 2018, Hasbro went to IDW and basically did a relaunch. And that ran for about 2 years. And ironically, they did the relaunch with a 0 issue in May of 2016 on Free Comic Book Day. And they wound up, and this goes into another whole discussion that we won't go into today. But Hasbro did a really good job, let's face it, G.I. Joe, all these other things. Hasbro has done a really good job with their toy comic universe, and IDW made some good money being their licensing agent for publishing their books. But the, they wound up ultimately having the Transformers, you know, move in basically the 2018 timeframe. And the Transformers and Optimus Prime witness Rom killing quote unquote humans. And that led to the and ultimately they figure out that there's other stuff going on, but they have a conflict there. But that's how they transitioned Rom out and part of the Transformers in.
Mm.
And
Oh,
there's a whole backstory in that, but I mean we don't have time to go into that. But it's interesting just to know that it happened. And I won't go into the whole thing with. I'm more the original 1970s, 80s Marvel. I never really got into the brief 2-year run of IDWs, but it's there, and I mean some of the same things go on. I mean, same, some
You need to
there's
read
only
it.
yeah, you
It's
need to read it,
awesome.
and the
They even bring the Visionaries in.
they
oh.
bring, yeah, you're right. They bring the Visionaries in. It's good. It's on my recapture list, but I'll tell you this. And I had forgotten about this, and I have got to go back and find it. In 2020, they did a limited series run. It was only 3 issues, and it was broken up heavily because of COVID. But the 3 issues finally did get published, and it's called Rom Dire Wraiths, and it's set in 1969 with the moon landing.
Ooh.
Yes, and you're talking about Rom and adventurers. I mean, this is a battle between astronauts and dire wraiths.
Mhm.
And not to give away the plot lines, but one of our famous astronauts, is not necessarily a human being at the end of the story.
Mm.
So,
Oh,
there's a setup for future in there
that's
too.
a nice plot twist.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. So that one, I mean, for you guys that know me, I'm a huge NASA space fan. So I am going to be on the hunt. And when I was refreshing my memory on this, I'm like, ooh, I do not have these 3 stories, and I'm gonna have to go find them. So I
Mm.
mean, that's that. And if you can pull the image up one more time,
Yeah, absolutely.
because and this is more of a side note on the comic book industry. You'll notice that up at the top, you've got that's the cover from issue 1, but it's also the cover, if you'll notice it's also the cover for the first round of the omnibus that just came out because Marvel got their rights back from IDW. Um, but then down here toward the bottom, next to the 5 square issue, is Rom, and he's holding the baby, and he's got Wolverine is coming in over his shoulder. Um, so this is volume 2 of the omnibus right here, and you can't really see it, but the next picture over is a photo I took off of at my comic shop, and the price tag on that comic is 120 on that omnibus is $125,
Hmm.
and they've got a 30% off, taking it down to 87.50. And I mean, so these 2 omnibuses together are, 87. I mean, discounted, they're $88 each. Part of the reason for that is you've got the percentage rights for Hasbro for them to be able to do the reprints. And then, of course, I think there's also some percentage ownerships for Bill Mantello, that is in there too. But it's pretty steep, and because of the rights involved, bouncing back between depending on what they do as far as wanting a movie. I mean, because Rocket Raccoon was used in Marvel movies, as we all know. Rom would make a great movie, but it's a matter of the ownership rights between, depending on what the storyline would be, between Marvel, Hasbro, which owns the character, and possibly IDW.
Wow.
So, and it's whether or not we actually ever see a ROM movie kind of up in the air. And I'm wondering, and when I was doing research online, they've redone these 2 omnibuses, but there's not much hope on whether or not we're going to see any new issues. So that's kind of my ROM background.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we got a couple more comments here. Cliff, you got a fangirl. Micah Renee Riley says, Cliff, you look beautiful, don't you think? Chris Jowers.
She's never this nice to me in person. Don't believe it.
Dave Mattingly, I've always loved Keith Griffin's writing and art.
Mm-hmm.
And Carl Winsman says, sorry that I missed most of the show doing cat daddy duties. It's quite great. You got yourself a handful of kitties there, so don't worry. I know how you feel. But you can always go back and watch the show after, or continue watching the Multiverse fundraiser. Once again, we're doing this fundraiser for comic books for kids. We got about 10 minutes left. Do you guys want to quickly touch on your next characters, or? I mean, okay, so as far as I don't have any favorite B-list characters really, but I do dress up as some of them. There's my Deathbird from the Shi'ar Empire. I try to do characters that a lot of people in my city don't dress up as, just to add some flavor. There's my Domino.
Oh, cool.
Oh, cool.
There's my Phantasm outfit.
Yes.
And there's my Dazzler. But and then of course, my Mystique outfit here, that I really didn't need to take the time to do the makeup, but I did it quick for you guys here. But I know, Clyde, you have a character that's similar to Dazzler in a little way, but I feel like she's more Alana Miles inspired.
She actually is Nightcat, and she is her only appearance is in this Nightcat Prestige Origin issue that Marvel put out, 1991. The same year that they released, unlike Dazzler, she actually had an album released, and had a single that was released. None of them charted, but this was part of, you guys were talking about the merchandising that Marvel had done with toys. They were pretty successful in that, especially because of people like Bill Mantlo writing such good stories to go along with it. There was a time before the MCU, in the bad old days, where Stan Lee probably wore out 87 pairs of shoes going to cocktail parties and trying to get things going with movies, TV, and multimedia. Getting the superheroes, their properties, into other medias. A few times it worked out, like the Incredible Hulk hit TV show, but more often it was Dazzler who didn't get any albums out, or any movies, or any TV shows, despite a lot of trying to do it. But there was a time when, if you showed up at a cocktail party and Stan Lee was there, if you wanted to make a pitch for some kind of property that wasn't just comics, he'd probably would snatch up the opportunity and try to make something out of it. So Dazzler didn't work out the way he wanted. So 11 years later, he decided to do Nightcat, and so they got a young lady that was a singer. Um, they chose her to actually be this live action superhero that worked out just about as well as the Human Fly being a real life stunt man. But Jacqueline Tavares um, was going to be this Nightcat character. She put out the album. She did the singing. They were planning to do like a crossover with Spider-Man and a comic book series. After the Boffo reviews came in from that Prestige format origin story, and the album after it charted and was featured with Casey Kasem and Wolfman Jack and all that is the top pop hit of the week.
Oh wow!
But when it was all said and done, Boffo wasn't exactly the word. It was more like Droppo, because it didn't chart. Nobody liked it. The reviews were bad. So she showed up in the same year, 1991's Marvel of the Year in Review. They had like a spoof record review of her. That's it. Nightcat never showed her face again. So I think that as
need to bring her back.
as a satirical, you can go out and listen to the records. By the way, they're on. You found it, Willow.
It's actually really good. Like I found it. I found it on YouTube, and I actually enjoy it. But mind you, that's because I'm an '80s kid. But it kind of reminded me of the day when Gem and the Holograms was out, and the dolls came with the tapes.
I won't go into. There's one thing about this character that needs to be. They need to do. Stan dropped the ball. He wrote this story, and it has essence of Hannah Montana, like 6 years before that was a show, because a superhero singer who has a secret identity. But also, there's a villain in it called, unfortunately, Dr. Ecstasy, and he is a designer drug creator. Oh. And he takes the essence of a cat and injects it, because everybody wants to have like animal powers when they're doing drugs in the 90s, right? Everybody wants to be a gooey duck, a human gerbil. So, but they're doing these experiments on people that are problematic to their business. And so she gets a cat. So she has cat powers. Okay. They've got to go back because Stan Lee missed a golden opportunity. We've got all these super soldier serum stories. Science gone wrong because they tried to replicate the super soldier serum. This needs to be a Frank formula, because if you know anything about the Wizard, he was given mongoose blood, which gave him one of the worst origin stories ever, gave him super speed back in the 40s. This guy's got to be carrying on the Frank formula work. I'm just saying, the new series, we could get that. We need to give it to somebody like Mark Russell to do this satirical social commentary on celebrity, superheroes like the boys. Make it an MA title and bring her back.
With mongoose blood, I dare to dream what the Munchies would be like. Just saying.
Yeah.
Oh man, you guys are fun to hang out with. I'm sorry that we ran out of time. But again, you guys, if you guys can donate to our fundraiser, all the money goes to Comic Books for Kids. It was a pleasure talking about B-list comic book characters, and I look forward to talking more with you guys in the future. So,
thanks for hosting us, Willow.
Thanks for being the referee for all of us here.
Oh, no problem at all. I love comic books, and I'm gonna have to go to my local comic book shop and find these comics.
Can you give me a copy of Nightcat? And they'll say,
I will try.
Next fundraiser, we just need to have a separate B-list feed and just have us talking about characters for 24 hours. I know I could do it. So let's just do that next time.
Yeah, there you go.
Absolutely. All right. You guys have a great day, and please tune into the next show. I should know what is next, but
independent comic books, comic book creators, I think, right. Indie comics folks.
All right, excellent. So go on to that. You guys have a good day.
All righty.
You too.